Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN member Angela Moore, founder of Modern Money Advisor based in Miami, Florida, on the show today. Angela started her career in the financing side of a car dealership. She was making killer money, but found herself in a lot of personal debt and hired her own financial planner to help her sort out her personal finances. The process was so helpful that she decided to become a financial planner herself. After spending about 10 years at Merrill Lynch and Charles Schwab, she decided to launch her own firm in early 2018. 9 months in, she has 21 financial planning clients and has recently merged with another XYPN member to lay the foundation to scale her firm. She talked about her desire to scale and eventually sell her business, which I asked a lot of questions about, and it was fun to learn more. Angela has big dreams for what she wants to build, and alongside her new partner, Ariel, they are getting ready to really take off. How much money do you need to launch your own firm? That's a question we've got at XY Planning Network hundreds, if not thousands of times. To answer it once and for all, we developed a free budget template that accounts for the many variables of your first year in business. Along with the template, successful XYPN members opened their books for us and shared how they did it, what they spent, and what they do differently. Our first year budget download is an incredibly valuable resource for anyone considering launching a firm of their own. Download it for free at www.xyplanningnetwork.com/budget. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/187. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Angela. Hey, Angela, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So for the benefit of listeners, give me a quick overview of your practice, where you're located, when you got started, how many clients you have, and if you have a niche market, and then we'll dig into the details.
Sure. So the name of my firm is Modern Money Advisor. I launched May 17th of 2018 in Miami, Florida. And my niche market is young professionals who are struggling with debt repayment. One of the segments that is most drawn to me are professional African-American women. So that's kind of, I didn't start off with that being my niche, but that's what my niche has kind of become.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are so few advisors that are non-white, basically. I mean, the CFP statistics are pretty staggering for the very low percentage of non-white. Like, I feel like advisors that are of color, like you sort of get like pigeonholed into this, like, oh, of course you're going to work with, African-American women because you're an African-American woman. Like, do you see that? Do you think we will eventually break that stereotype of like, you're a person of color, so you have to work with people of color?
I think that all types of people work with me, but more of Black women work with me because of exactly what you just said. It's like, I think it's the client, the prospects and the clients are looking for someone that looks like them to work with. So yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. In a way, we get pigeonholed. I'm not complaining. I mean, I enjoy it. I think like most people, I started kind of trying to serve everyone, and I didn't really have a niche, and everyone kept asking me, what's your niche? And I unfortunately couldn't answer that. I didn't know what my niche was. It's just been naturally created, which has been extremely helpful. Now I understand why everyone says you should have a niche, because when it comes to marketing and kind of targeting who targets you, it's so much easier. If I know that most of my clients are Black women, it's easier for me to market to them.
That's fair. Yeah, I said pigeonholed it. That probably sounded more negative than it should have. I cannot imagine as a white male, I cannot imagine trying to find an advisor that looks like me and being unsuccessful, right? I've got a lot of options if I'm looking for a white dude.
Right.
So it's probably a huge relief to some folks to finally be able to find an advisor that looks like them, understands their background and what they're going through and that sort of thing. So just interesting that, I think it's almost an assumption and it shouldn't be, but it's the reality of trying to remember CFP's numbers, or something like 5 or 6% of CFPs are people of color, which is just absurd. So they're working on it, but it is really low. So how did you get into financial planning? What is your background that sort of led down this path? Did you think you always wanted to be an advisor?
No, it's all just happened naturally. I actually initially wanted to be a psychiatrist. And when I, started looking into the requirements for that, I realized that I'd have to do 10 plus years of education for that, and decided at the last minute to change my major to accounting, literally 3 days before school started. And then I, studied accounting. I had an internship my freshman year at KPMG, hated it. It was the most boring thing I'd ever done in my life, looking at like spreadsheets all day. And there wasn't a lot of human interaction in accounting. My sophomore year in college, I interned at Deloitte & Touche doing audit, and same thing. And I had this realization that there's no way I can be an accountant. What am I going to do with my life? And so I just kind of went through the rest of school not knowing what I was going to do. And after I graduated, I ended up landing a job in the car business as a finance director at a dealership. And that's when my journey to becoming a financial planner kind of started, because first of all, I was seeing a lot of people come through my finance office that really had no clue how their credit works. They wouldn't have money for a down payment. And, these would be people of all income levels, all ages. And it's like, you don't have $1,000 to put down on this car. And I just started realizing, man, there's a huge problem in terms of financial literacy. And at the same time, I was going through my own financial literacy problems because I was making a ton of money at a very young age. And I just had no clue, like, how much should I be saving? How do I invest? I mean, I just didn't know anything. And I had an accounting degree, so I thought that I didn't even know how to do my own taxes. That's how bad it was.
Which accounting, obviously there's two sides of accounting, but you would think they would have at least taught you that much. But I know this has been beaten to death on this podcast, but like, it's just amazing to me the lack of financial literacy and education that you get even at the college level. Like, you would think at some point you would get the education, and you just don't. It's really at no level.
And so from there, I ended up kind of having a financial crisis. I had taken a large sum of my savings and I had spent it on remodeling my kitchen. And at this point, I was 26 years old. I was like swimming in debt. I had a mortgage. I had a car loan. I had credit cards, and I was saving. But like I said, I didn't know how much I should be saving. I took a large amount of that savings and redid my kitchen. And then right after that, I had a horrible month and I hardly earned any money. And it scared the mess out of me. I was like, if this continues happening, I'm not going to have enough money to pay my mortgage. I'm not going to have enough money to sustain my lifestyle. And I just started to freak out, and I started looking for a financial advisor, and no one wanted to work with me because I had maybe $25,000 in a 401k, and that was maybe another $5,000 in cash. I don't know. It was like nothing. And so no advisor wanted to work with me, and it was frustrating. People wouldn't even call me back. And I ended up finding this advisor who felt like it was his public duty to help me. And he told me, it's going to be $1,600. And I remember laughing and thinking, I'm not paying you $1,600. And then I went home and I saw this pair of $700 Gucci shoes in my closet. And I was like, you are so dumb.
Now, I am thoroughly confused. You were 26 years old. You've got $700 pairs of Gucci shoes. You own a house. You're doing a kitchen remodel, and you have $30,000 in the bank, which is significantly more than the average American, much less the 26-year-old. So clearly, like, you were paying attention to your budget.
I was making $180,000 a year, and I had a budget from the time I was 18. So I had an 820 Beacon score at that age. I thought I knew everything. You couldn't tell me anything. But clearly I didn't, because I was literally living paycheck to paycheck on $180,000 income at age 26.
Yeah, it's a great reminder that you can never have enough money to feel wealthy, right? That, people struggle to budget at when they make 50 grand a year, 180 grand a year, or $1 million a year, whether we think they should or not is irrelevant. It's a struggle. And so, to your point, here you are making $180,000 and can't find an advisor that's really interested in working with you. And that's where XYPN Network was born, was out of this frustration of like, you should have been an ideal client for an advisor. And they immediately just look at net worth and investable assets and see, well, she's broke. And like, you weren't broke, you had income, you just didn't have the assets yet. So yeah, okay. So you find an advisor. Do you go through the planning process with this advisor then?
Yeah. So then I decided to work with him. In the first meeting, he was like, bring all your stuff in. He was like, no more shopping. You have enough crap in your closet. No more eating out. Learn how to cook. And he just like, in that first meeting, he cut $800 out of my monthly budget. That started going towards debt repayment. On and on. Next thing you know, a few months in, I was debt free. Like it was just a whirlwind and a life-changing experience. It changed my life so much that within a few months, I decided I wanted to become a financial advisor. It just changed my whole life. I was like, I want to do what he does. And, I want to change people's lives. And, that's what I decided. And then I started figuring out how do I transition? How do I do this? And I ended up, finding the training program at Merrill Lynch, which is a 3-year training program. And I, fought to get in the door there. And to be honest with you, Merrill Lynch was going through like some diversity issues at the time. They had hired like a regional diversity manager, and they were looking to try and bring some diversity in the door. And I honestly, truly believe that's the only reason I got in the door, because I was a young Black woman. And as soon as I started there, I got the feeling that no one thought I was going to make it.
Yeah, you were just there for the color of your skin.
I was just there to fill a seat, to fill a number on their little quota for, minorities or whatever.
So to take one step back, I will say I hear a lot of folks that like did their own financial plan and discovered financial planning that way, like on their own. I'm not sure I've heard a story of an advisor that became an advisor after being a client, like had such an awesome experience, which is just so telling of the power of financial planning and why it's so hard to explain. But when you experience it, you're like, wow, like I really can help a lot of people, which is awesome. But now I have a vague sense of what you get paid at Merrill Lynch, and it is not $180,000 when you're going through their training program. So that's this isn't just like a small career shift. Like this is,
it was huge.
Yeah, that's a big life choice.
Yeah, luckily, because I had been working with this other advisor, I kind of set myself up to where I could earn less. I ended up selling my house. I got rid of my car and got a less expensive car. I made sure all of my living expenses, everything was under $2,000 a month. And then I took the job at Merrill Lynch, and Merrill paid me a starting salary of $40,000. My take home pay every month was about $2,000. Maybe $2,200, something like that.
So you went from making and spending $15,000 a month to making and spending 3 to 4 gross. That's a pretty impressive shift.
I guess I should say the part of the problem was that when I was in the car business, I was working 80 to 90 hours a week. Like we were open Saturday, Sunday, holidays, all of that, and didn't want to get trapped in that industry like so many others had. I just couldn't see myself working that much for the rest of my life. And as a woman, I started thinking like, how would I ever have children? How would I get married? I work all the time. I have no life. I have no social life. I haven't seen my mom, in years. I knew I needed to make a change, and financial planning to me was the answer, because I knew, I was like, if I just get enough experience, someday I could be working from home. I could work with people at my dining room table. And that's just what I had in my mind, that I was going to like get in at the floor level and grind my way to the top and then have my own business. And that was always my plan from the beginning. I just knew I just needed to get the experience first.
Now, did your advisor work from his dining room table?
Oh, no. He was part of Ameriprise, and he actually had several advisors working for him. So he had a large practice, actually. And he was the person in charge. So he kind of like did this as a favor, like trying to help a young person. I don't think he normally would have worked with a client like me.
The reason I'm curious, like, how did you even know working from home? Most people don't know this industry exists, much less the fact that you can actually build a business that lets you work from home and from your dining room table. Like, there are advisors that have spent their entire careers in the business that don't know some of us get to do that. So it's just cool that you already knew.
No, I didn't know. And that it was me being ignorant. Going into this industry, that's what I thought in my head. And then once I was in the industry for a while, just like what you're explaining, I started thinking that wasn't possible. I felt stuck. Once I was in the industry, I felt stuck. Like, okay, now I have to work for one of these firms. In fact, I didn't even know that financial planning firms existed. All I knew was the brokerage world.
And quite honestly, there are people that work in the brokerage world for the last 10, 15 years that still don't know our side of the world even exists. I think Kitsis has single-handedly put a dent in that bubble that they live in. But it's interesting how segmented our industry is between the brokerage houses and the wirehouses, the insurance companies, and the RIAs. It's just sort of interesting. So talk to me about the training program at Merrill Lynch. Obviously, not a good situation to walk into when you and the people around you feel like you're there because of a statistic, just the color of your skin and your gender, not necessarily clear skill set that you should have. There's no question you should have been there. So I guess how was that training program?
The training program, they focus a lot on client meetings. So it's like simulation. And this was 10 years ago now. So I don't know how different it is today. But when I joined, it was the PMD program, which was like the newer program. And they do a lot of simulations. So there was about 47 people in the training program. So it was I was in a large office in the Atlanta office. There was 100, maybe about 180 advisors in the office. And there were probably about 40 of us in the training program there. And so we would have like mock client meetings where we would go over an investment proposal or what have you and sit in front of someone and try to close them on moving their money to Merrill Lynch or whatever. And there would be coaches there. And so it was a program. But the problem I had with the program was great, but the problem I had was that, they were teaching us how to kind of close a deal. But my problem was once I closed the deal, I didn't really know what to do with these people's money. And I always knew in my heart that I'm asking someone to hand over their life savings to me, and I have no clue what I'm doing with it. And, they would always, just get it in. And once you get it in, somebody will help you. And it was just kind of like, I never felt very comfortable with that. So I always took it into my own hands to learn more and to do my own research and to try and just go above and beyond what the expectations were in terms of just bringing in accounts. Because that's what it's really focused on. Bring in accounts, bring in money. And it wasn't necessarily like your expertise. And the more I learned, and it's still like this to this day, the more I learned, the more I realized I don't know. I didn't know anything about, paying attention to someone's cost basis or, what the repercussions are of selling someone's entire investment portfolio and reallocating it. I mean, no one had taught me that. So that's just an example of, the lack of knowledge that I had at that time. But I'm being asked, I'm asking people to move, $1 million or $2 million into my care.
So what resources, I guess, did Merrill provide that you were able to go learn, or was it really like out on your own trying to figure this all out?
I mean, a lot of it is you trying to partner with existing advisors there and kind of getting mentoring and things like that. I mean, the training program was very much so focused on sales. If you wanted to actually learn what to do after that, it really required you to kind of partner with other advisors. And so that's what I started trying to do. I started trying to find someone who would be a good team or someone for me to partner with. And eventually I did find a team that I kind of sold myself to, which was that was a unique experience too, because I was seeing other people that would get hired and they would be asked to be on a team. And it was opposite with me. I had to go sell myself. I was emailing my resume and emailing, different people at the firm and, hey, I'm looking for a team to join and, just really going out there proactively and selling myself and trying to find the ideal team for me. So it was a little different because I recall specifically there was a young guy that had just graduated from Alabama State, and he played football, and he was on a team week 1. So, it was a different experience for me. I didn't have the same thing.
Fair enough. Yeah. And again, I think it's important for the stories to be told so that people recognize that it's happening, whether they see it or not, or whether whether they notice it, because it's happening in front of them, whether they choose to see it or not. That there is still a lot of that happening in the industry. I mean, in the world in general, but especially in our industry. So you got on a team. What does that exactly mean? So did you have to move at that point? Because you said you were in Atlanta?
No, so the team was actually based in the Atlanta office. The team that I joined was actually one of the top teams at Merrill Lynch. I think it's actually the largest, if not the second largest team at Merrill Lynch. And that team has grown to the point where they're servicing Fortune 500 companies and managing their stock option plans and their 401ks and all of that. And once I joined that team, I was partnered with different advisors on that team. And I started learning so much. At that point, I think in the first 6 months, I learned more than I had learned in the first 2 years being on my own. And so I'm a huge, obviously I tell everyone that getting experience and working with senior advisors is an invaluable experience because I learned about concentrated stock positions. I learned about stock options and Black-Scholes analysis. I learned about, cost basis. I learned about estate planning. I just learned about so many different complex strategies that I was not exposed to in my own practice prior to joining that team.
Makes sense. And I'm a huge fan of it as well, right? Like the best way to learn how to do financial planning is go watch someone do financial planning and then do financial planning while someone's watching. If you could take that Merrill Lynch training program that was just focused on sales and extend it through the entire planning process, I mean, that's the ideal, right? Many of us were not able to find that opportunity. I was one that was fortunate to be able to find that. But if you can find it, take it. It is worth 2 to 5 to 10 years of your career to go learn before you decide to start your own firm, if that's your path, which it certainly was yours, it's sort of the plan all along. So at what point during this process did you get your CFP? Because I know some of the companies like Merrill Lynch have gone back and forth on whether or not they support or even allow people getting the CFP designation.
Yeah, so as soon as you start I don't know if it's still like this, but it was like this back then. As soon as I started the training program, I immediately had to start taking the first initial course, which was investments for the CFP. So I finished investments and then I took another course. I can't remember. I think it might have been insurance or something. So they kind of wanted us to get the CFP. But then what happened was that the financial hurdles that we had to meet and the goals were so hard that I just felt like I don't have the time to study. I have to focus 100% of my time on hitting these goals or else I might not even have a job at the end of the day. So I just kind of stopped worrying about the CFP and felt like keeping my job was more important and I just didn't have the time to study. So I kind of let that go for many, many years. And maybe about 4 or 5 years later, I decided to start working on it again.
How long were you at Merrill Lynch total then?
I was at Merrill for 5 years. And after leaving Merrill, I moved to Miami and I joined Charles Schwab. And it was while I was at Schwab that I started studying again.
Got a little extra time back.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what were you doing at Schwab then? Like, what was the position?
So what was cool about Schwab was that, because when I left Merrill, or when I was leaving Atlanta, I should say, I had to leave the team. And that was very complex in of itself because the team wanted to keep all of my clients. And so it was almost like, okay, I'm going to have to start all over again after putting in 5 years of work to build this practice. And that was a very stressful thing. You know, I you mentioned the word pigeonholed earlier. I felt pigeonholed in that situation because it was like, okay, either I stay here where I'm not really happy, or I start from scratch, which I had just done that and I knew how hard it was. So I kind of looked for other opportunities and I found Schwab. And what was cool about Schwab is that when you join Schwab, they give you a book of business. So prospecting is not as essential. And that was the part of the job that I really didn't enjoy anyways. So when I joined Schwab, they gave me a book of $300 million and about 300 clients. And then it's your job to build relationships with those clients through financial planning. Because a lot of Schwab clients are self-directed. They go online, they open an account, they move millions of dollars in, but they don't necessarily have an advisory relationship. So it was my job to try and connect with them and build a relationship and engage them in financial planning and just to get them more involved in the firm, to get them more bought into to Charles Schwab.
So you were not able to bring any of your clients over. Fortunately, you were able to get a book of business at Schwab. But how long were you there at Schwab then?
So I was at Schwab for 5 years. And Schwab, Schwab was awesome. I loved working at Schwab. But the thing about Schwab is it was very, very high volume. And it was, as a result, very stressful. And the clientele there, my clientele anyways, being in Florida, it was a much older population. My average client was probably anywhere from age 65 to age 88. So it was a lot of older people who I obviously didn't have much in common with. It just got to the point where it was a very stressful work environment because it's so high volume. And the other thing was that I started to notice that so many people were coming to me, so many people my own age were coming to me for financial advice. Friends of friends, people I've met at events. They would contact me and say, Angela, I need help. This is my situation, but they wouldn't have any assets. And I would tell people all the time, hey, call me, come by my office at 5 p.m. or let's meet up on Saturday. And I started helping all these people for free. And one day, I'll never forget, I had a very large account. It was about a $40 million account. The clients, it was a corporate account. They moved 30 million out. And I remember my manager at the time freaked out over it and kind of lost it. And she came in the office and was kind of screaming at me about it. It had nothing to do with me. It had to do with the board of the company, making decisions or whatever. But in that moment, I was already completely stressed out. And then her yelling at me, I just felt like I need to get out of here. I'm so stressed out. And at the same time, that same day, I realized that I had 7 referrals. All of them were young people. And who didn't have enough assets to meet the minimum requirement. And I remember thinking I'm not advertising to these people. I'm not marketing. I'm not doing anything. And I'm getting 7 referrals in 1 week. And it just occurred to me right in that moment that I needed to quit and start my own business. And I went home that night. I called up one of my girlfriends in LA who has a branding company. And I said, I need to start a company. I need a logo. I need a website. I need it immediately. And I literally stayed up till 3 a.m. every night for the next 2 weeks, writing my bio and creating the website and all the content and the processes and systems, all of that. And at that time, I didn't even have my CFP. So this was in 2016, I think. Right as I was about to quit, my manager quit. And then I thought, maybe I should rethink this. Maybe I need to get my CFP first and, save up money. And then it was the more rational, common sense person took over. And so what I did at that point was I aggressively went after the CFP. I think I finished the CFP in 8 months after that. It was just go hard or go home. I just got it done.
You had a reason to get it done.
I just got it done. Yeah. And I saved, put myself on a super tight budget, saved money. It took me a good 2 years before I actually quit because I was just terrified. I was scared. I kept thinking, well, I can make this work at Schwab, and oh, I have these benefits, and oh, I have this salary, and it just was scary. I was scared, but I at this point, I had invested so much time and money in my own business that it was kind of like, I can't just let this go. I have to do it now. Like there's no turning back.
Yeah, I've said it many times on the show before, but I liken it to, it's hard to get out of a warm bed. Even if the coffee's on the other side of the room, it's still hard to get out of that bed, get out of the warm covers, because that's really what it is, where you're getting out of this place where like it's not ideal, but life's comfortable. You're making good money. You've got good benefits. If you just stay there for your career, you'll retire just fine and be a wealthy person. Like all of those things are there, but it's like, but if it's not scratching that itch, especially once you've gone as far as you had gone, not just thinking about it, but like actually doing the things, it's tough to shut that off. And ultimately, it's just it's more of a decision of when, not if. So you made the decision, and I'm assuming that was, I guess, early in 2018 then, since you ended up launching in 2018?
Well, it was in 2017. I passed the CFP, I think that March. I think it was. I passed in March, and then I started working on my master's degree. And a few months later, I decided to quit. And I quit on December 6th of 2017.
So what did you do between then and sort of launching the firm? What was your downtime spent doing, which I assume it wasn't really downtime?
Well, unbeknownst to me, the registration process in Florida took forever. We filed all of my registration paperwork on the first week of January, and my registration wasn't approved until the end of April, I want to say. So it took several months, and that was very difficult because I thought maybe it would take 2 months. I never thought that it would take, 4 or 5 months to get approved. And so that whole time I had no income. I couldn't market myself. I couldn't really do anything except work on my processes and like my website and stuff. And so that's what I did. I spent all of that time kind of putting together processes, marketing, and like just planning everything out for the launch. And then I ended up launching 2 weeks after my approval.
Yeah, for folks that don't know, some states are extra difficult. Florida, I shouldn't say difficult. Some just take longer than others. Some are more difficult than others. Every state's a little different. So talk to your compliance person. We're trying to do a better job of tracking that information just because it sort of ebbs and flows based on how many regulators they have hired at the time. But yeah, Florida's a little notorious. But it's why we recommend having cash on hand, because you just don't know, you're going to go to get registered and suddenly you've got a couple months where, no income, and that hurts.
Yeah, I did. Luckily, I had saved and I had reduced my expenses, and I'm married, so my husband had to step up quite a bit, and so I was able to make it through. And what's crazy is that it wasn't just those months. It's like even after you launch, I started bringing in money, but then I was spending that money to grow the business. So I really haven't taken a real paycheck for myself yet. I launched May 18th. I just recently started paying myself a small $1,000 a month paycheck.
Now, how did that feel though? Like that first time you took $1,000 out of the company?
It just, I thought to myself, I'm just going to do it because I have to earn something, but one of the things about my business is that I think when I first started, I thought, oh, this is going to be a nice little relaxing business and, kind of that lifestyle business type of feel. But shortly after, I got accepted into a women's accelerator program for female entrepreneurs. And there was a speaker that came, and she manages a $100 million company. And one of the things I took away from the program, I'm still in the program now, it ends in March. But one of the things I took away is that it takes the same amount of effort to have a small business as it does to have an enterprise. And my mindset shifted to enterprise. And I started thinking, I can build something big here. I can build something massive. And that's what I started doing. And so a lot of the revenue that was coming in, because I was surprised. I started making money almost immediately. But I was using that money to then build platforms and build systems and build other things for the business.
Yeah, that enterprise mindset is something that's been coming up more often on the podcast lately. And it really is, we had Michael Gerber speak at the conference this year about this specific topic. For anybody who was there, the presentation left much to be desired. But that's his whole thing, is that, it really is, it is no more complicated to run a big company as a small company. It's just different. And deciding what you want your day-to-day to be and what you want, I get the type of work you want to be doing and the problems you want to be solving, because the problems that you're solving at $100 million in revenue or $100 million company, very different than at, 100,000 or $1 million or 10 million. And so it just changes, and it's hard to know. Did you feel like working through that accelerator program, you were able to get exposed to like what life is actually like at that level? Because I feel like that's a big, I want to be that big, but no one really knows what it's like until their company is that big. And then it's too late to go back.
Yeah. I started listening to this other podcast, How I Built This. And that really, because those are all, young entrepreneurs who started something. The guy who started WeWork is on there. The girl who started LearnVest, Bliss Spas. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are talked about on there. And they talk about like how they went from small to big and what that entailed and all of that. And, I think that I literally do think it's the same amount of effort. And I think it's actually, when you have an enterprise mindset, even if you do stay a small business, it makes operating your small business that much easier. Because one of the things that I had to look at is, how do I scale? And the way to scale for me is systematizing and automating and creating systems and processes that are repeatable over and over again. And that, you can bring someone in and the training is there because everything has a process. No one's winging anything. And so with that, you can stay a small business if you want, or you can expand. But either way, you have these systems and processes in place that make your job so much easier and so much more efficient and optimal.
Yeah, I love that advice, because that's when you plan to stay small, I think you make potentially some poor choices because you're going to have time. Just because you have time doesn't mean spending it on certain activities or inefficiencies is a good idea. So I love that advice. What other things do you feel like you've been doing from an investment standpoint and just where you're committing your time based on this sort of enterprise mindset and the decision to go ahead and to be building and laying the foundation to really promote growth in the company?
Yeah. One of the things that I have been working on is building a platform for my financial planning clients. It's kind of like a course. When clients come on, you know how there's a lot of things that we say over and over to clients that's kind of educational in nature. Maybe you're talking about estate planning and you're explaining what a will is and what a trust is and what the difference is. And you're saying these things over and over again to clients. What I've done is I've created a platform where I've kind of recorded videos and classes and content. And so when a client signs on with me for financial planning, they're going through this whole automated system. And when they meet with me, they're strictly meeting with me for a reduced period of time to specifically go through their financial planning topics. And so I don't have to spend a ton of time explaining, the basics of investing or the basics of estate planning. They've already kind of gone through video tutorials and content and stuff that prepares them for our discussion. So that's one of the things that I
require that for all of your new clients.
So do I require them to go through that? Yeah. Everything's automated. So they go on my website. They don't even have to talk to me before they sign up. They can sign up for financial planning right on my website. They pick the plan they want to do. They sign up immediately. Then they get this welcome video and they're on that platform and they're going through, and then, they get the client agreement to sign electronically. They then get the link to start inputting their details. They get the document that tells them what documents to upload. And all of that is done before they even speak to me for the first time.
So you really are investing a ton of time in automation and efficiency. So what are some of the tools that you're using? Like what's the platform that you're using to host the videos and have them go through that process?
So I'm using a standard education platform like Kajabi or Teachable or what have you. The one that I'm using specifically is Kajabi. And then, I'm using all different types of, like I'm using HelloSign right now. We use JotForm. I'm using Acuity scheduling. So I'm using a lot of different tools that are all kind of like linked together and combined that all talk to each other. And, I mentioned to you earlier that I'm merging with another XYPN member currently, and we could talk about that too. But she is the automation queen. And so a lot of the systems and processes are automated. Like when a client signs on for a meeting, their information is immediately put into Wealthbox. A profile is created for them. Then as soon as they sign the client agreement, it goes into Wealthbox. I mean, all of that is automated on the front end. So it really frees up a lot of time for me to actually focus on bringing on more clients than I normally would be able to.
So let's talk about the decision to bring on a partner, because you've been rocking it for 8-9 months now. We haven't talked numbers yet, which we will here in a bit, about your growth, and you're seeing some awesome growth in the firm. You've decided to go enterprise, and that's going to be the focus. So why did it make sense to start thinking and going ahead and partnering with another advisor now?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons. So Ariel, that's my partner. We were in the same launch group together. And through our launch group, it ended up staying together after the initial first few weeks. And Ariel and I think very similar. And so we would oftentimes get on calls and share our automation ideas and share our processes. And, what are you doing? And what are you doing? And we would kind of work together and implement a lot of the same stuff together. And so over time, it got to the point where we realized that we each had a very unique skill set, and that together, if we combined those, we could just really achieve great big things, And so it's a scary thing to combine with someone. And I think it was tough for her because she had to one of us had to make the decision to give up our firm and merge into the other. And I think, it's kind of like your baby and you're emotionally attached to it and you've built it from the ground up, and it's hard to let go, even if it's only been a few months. So there,
you spent how much time naming your firm,
Exactly.
And you're just like, but I don't want to give it up. But I mean, either one or both of you have to give it up. There's no sense in merging and keeping. I guess you could keep both brands, but that seems inefficient. So
yeah, so it was, the decision came though, and to me, it's common sense, and I feel like everyone should have partners at this point because, what if life happens? What if you get sick? What if you want to go on vacation? What if something happens? Yeah, you could send an email out to clients and be like, hey, I'm not going to be reachable for the next week. Either that or you're working on your vacation, one of the other. So I felt like in order to really scale and grow, I'm going to need not just one partner, but I'm going to need multiple. I'm going to need employees. I'm going to need partners. I'm going to need all kinds of, I'm going to need a huge team. And so this is just a start, in my opinion. If you have someone else that does great work, and I think she's a genius, and we work well together, we know each other at this point, she's credentialed, I just felt like it was a no-brainer. And it was just a matter of, okay, well, how do we do this now? Because we're both extremely busy. So then, there's this whole compliance thing of registering, and that's overwhelming. But what's great is that we're in XYPN. So we just basically reached out to compliance and did, the special planning, the special compliance, the premium compliance service. And so they're taking care of all of that for us. So it's just, to me, the hardest part was the emotional part of, her deciding to let go of her firm. And then we hired an attorney, a business attorney, who walked through all of these different potential issues that could arise in a partnership. And we created an operating agreement that, addresses all these different things that could possibly happen if there's a dispute, if someone wants to leave, if someone gets sick, all of these different things that you kind of have to think through when you're creating a partnership.
So how did y'all structure it from a entity standpoint, and then also just like overall ownership as well as decision making? Because those two things can be different.
Yeah. So our situation is super unique because there's more businesses involved. So Ariel now has a automation business. It's a consulting company where she's helping advisors automate their practices. So that's her own business. Then we have the financial planning business that we're doing together. And then I have a separate business where I'm doing financial literacy education and speaking and books and stuff. And so the time that we're dedicating to the business is different. And so our partnership is, I think it's 65, 35 or something like that, where I retain 60% ownership. She retains 35. But then we have a different payout structure for paying out any revenue that we pay out, revenue shares. It's very complex. The business attorney, she's an expert in that. She really helped to guide us through that. And it was kind of a complicated process that I don't think Ariel or I really knew much of anything in terms of this business agreement, but the attorney was essential in guiding us through that.
Yeah, I appreciate that you highlight that, because Michael and I have been through this as well. When we first partnered, we just drafted something on rocketlawyer.com, I think. And as long as we get along, that's great. And so we went through that same process. We were making some changes. And it's just amazing the things that you need to think about, because, on one hand, it is sort of the obvious death, disability, dissolution, or, dissolving the company, that sort of thing. But like, it is also like, what happens if you disagree? What happens if one of you wants out? What happens when one of you wants to sell the company and the other doesn't? Like, you start going through all the scenarios. And of course, attorneys have seen all of the horrible cases of it going wrong. And so they're trying to cover down and be sure you make some of these decisions. But it's sort of like, getting an estate plan in place, right? That you gotta make a plan, and it sucks to think about, but yeah, and you can make them infinitely complex or simple. It just depends on how you want to structure it. So it sounds like the ownership structure is a little different. It's not 50-50, it's 65-35. And then how did y'all think about decision making? Like, did you assign, CEO, COO and sort of duties along with that? Or are you joint decision makers? What's the plan there?
So Ariel, her passion is kind of the automation and technology piece. So she's our chief technology officer and I'm the CEO. And decision making pretty much is all on me, because that was something that I didn't necessarily want to give up. And her thing is, she really likes the automation and all of that. And she's kind of still going to be running her other business. So she's not going to be working full time in the financial planning firm, whereas I will for the most part. So we really had to think through all of that. And a lot of it was me just saying, like, well, how involved do you want to be? Like, what do you want to do? What don't you want to do? And then we created a list of all the responsibilities that are involved in running the firm. And we highlighted certain things that we could outsource. And then we highlighted certain things I would be responsible for and certain things she would be responsible for. So we created a whole plan before we even went to the attorney. And we also talked about, how much of our time we would want to dedicate to this business. So one of the things was she didn't want to dedicate as much time to the financial planning business as I would. And so this is kind of going to be a side or a second job for her, I would say. Whereas for me, it's my primary. So all of that had to be taken into consideration as we were forming the partnership.
Well, thank you for detailing that. I know it's early on. I may have to have you back on to talk about it in a year or two to just talk about what you've learned, because I know there are a lot of planners out there that are thinking about partnering. They recognize, like you did, they recognize they don't want to be by themselves, and they want some backup. They want another set of eyes and ears to bounce ideas off of. And you can get a lot of that by being in a study group, which is awesome. It is different when you have a business partner. I think the only reason there are a lot of reasons we've been successful, but one of the big things that I credit it to is that, Michael and I are very different, and that's a good thing to have that. And then, we brought in a COO, which is different from the two of us. And so then all of a sudden you have three opinions in the room, and we don't always agree, but it really helps to find the best answer for us. So I know it's early, but awesome work on getting through that. Cause I know there's a lot to think about when you're thinking about partnering, and it is kind of like giving up your baby. It's sort of how it feels. Eventually you'll appreciate it, but it is kind of tough early on.
And I think what helps too is we kind of talked about what our end goals, and our end goal for the financial planning firm is to sell it in a few years. So I think that makes it easier. It's not like, oh, this is for life, this is forever. Our goal is really to build up a firm that another firm could then acquire to help them service millennials. Because I think there's a huge opportunity there. I think there's a lot of firms out there who are trying to figure out, how do we bridge the gap to the next generation? And if we can build something and show that it's successful, and it's systematized and automated, that becomes something that can easily be sold. And that's our goal.
So this has been awesome. I don't think I've ever had someone say their goal was to sell their firm at all on this show, much less, early on in the business. So why is that, I guess, the goal, as opposed to building something that you own and maybe even bringing someone else in to run it or whatever? Why sell instead of just building your own enterprise? Because
Ariel and we both have many passions. I would say my passion is speaking and educating and, all of that. And that's fun to me. And I feel like it's more scalable. And Ariel now, she's loving this whole technology thing. And, in the future, she'd like to actually, build software technology and things like that. So I think there's other things we want to do, but in my opinion, the financial planning firm requires a lot from a compliance standpoint. It requires long hours of work. It's not as scalable. So to me, I would like to build it and then, maybe offload it to a larger firm that can take over the compliance and can take over all that. I would still love to work there and be part of it, but as an employee, and then I'd have a lump sum of cash in my pocket that I could then use to build another business and, my educational business or whatever it is I want to build. And when I listen to some of these stories of other, firms, like, for example, LearnVest, the young lady that created that, she had CFPs working for her doing subscription-based financial planning. She sold to a trust company. I forget which one it was, but she sold for $125 million. So when I think about that, I think, hey, if I could get 25 million, that would change my whole life, and then I wouldn't have to worry about compliance and I wouldn't have to, work 16-hour days or whatever. And that, in my mind, it would be helping other firms bridge the gap. And, there's nothing wrong with that. I think, so I don't have a problem selling it. And then I would still have other stuff I'm doing, It's just like you and Michael, you guys are doing many different things and you have all these different businesses. And at some point, one of them might have more risk than others or whatever. And, I don't know, you maybe decide at some point, do we want to continue doing this? Maybe we offload this for someone else to do or, whatever. And that's how I look at the financial planning. And I kind of had to pitch that to Ariel to say, hey, like, imagine in 5 years if we sold this thing and, walk away with a lump sum of cash and then do other things.
Sure. No, and I can hear the business accelerator in what you're saying, and that's a good thing. Like I think it's awesome to be thinking about the business as a business, and what is the end goal for some folks? It's to create an income stream. For others, and quite honestly, I think over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to start seeing some of the firms that got started in the 2010 to 2012 era, maybe 10 years in. I think we're going to start seeing some of them get sold because they were started by the true hardcore entrepreneur, loves getting something off the ground, isn't passionate about running a business when it's at scale, and quite honestly, like wants to just do something else. They have other passions. They've built a business. They've been successful. They sell it. They take that money. They go build another business or do some other activity. So I think I don't hear people say very often that that's what they're thinking, but I think a lot more folks are thinking it, and even more folks will do it ultimately whenever some of those opportunities come up, because big firms are still treating us like a little stuffed animal and trying to figure out, what cute things we're doing over here. And in another few years, suddenly the firms are going to be like, oh, wait a minute. Are you for sale? Like, can I buy your firm? And it's going to be awesome opportunities. So one thing I do want to touch on is that you have had just like really strong growth, and you've worked with a lot of clients in your first 8 months. So I'm not sure if you mentioned earlier, my notes had that you've worked with 21 clients in your first 6 months. So how are you finding success? Obviously, you had some contacts initially and knew some folks, and you said like really they started showing up from day one. But where are you seeing success from a client acquisition standpoint?
I get probably 90% of my clients from Instagram. And people are always shocked when they hear that, but that was my plan from the beginning, because I look on Instagram for everything. If I want to find a hairstylist, I go on Instagram. If I want to find someone to do my nails, I go on Instagram. I go on Instagram for everything. So when I was launching my firm, I thought, Instagram is where it's at. and it's free. You can build an audience there, and then you can market to that audience for free. And, Instagram and Facebook was my whole strategy from the beginning. So that's where I've been literally getting all of my business from. Just posting consistently, running little inexpensive, $50 ads here and there. And I just, I think it was either you or Michael Kitces talked about the ocean of opportunity and how like traditional firms are swimming in shark-infested bloody waters, and how for us there's just so much opportunity. That's the truth. And when I post something, I have like I don't even have that many followers on Instagram. I only have about 5,000, but I get a few clients each month from my Instagram account. And then the other clients are coming from Google, just random people who've searched for me. I get a few clients from the XYPN search, and then I get referrals from FPA. I'm actually on the board of my local FPA chapter, and I make sure that all of the advisors there know that I cater to all the clients that they basically don't want to work with. So, yeah, between those things, I've been getting consistent business, and it grows every month. And sometimes I'm overwhelmed. And that's why, going back to the partnership thing, it's like, I know I can't do all this on my own. I'm going to, pretty soon I'll be hiring. I already have people I've identified that I'm looking to bring on as financial planners, because there's a lot of business coming in. And it's just like a whole bunch of people who have debt and are trying to figure out how to live. Like how, our generation has so many different competing priorities. Your rent is high, you're traveling, you're spending money on Starbucks and all kinds of other stuff. And then you have student loans and credit cards. And I mean, people are like desperate to just get a handle on their financial situation. And one thing about my practice that is kind of maybe a not so good thing is that hardly any of my clients really have assets to invest. They're all just like me, like how I was. And, that's okay. Like, people come in, they pay the fee, and they're looking for solutions and looking for help. And, I've been getting a lot of that. So
Yeah, I've always felt like you're going to work with the clients early on when they have debt and income, and then later on when they have assets, other advisors are going to wish they could get that business, and they're not going to be able to because that client built a relationship with you. And this is still a relationship business. No one's leaving you and going to another advisor because they're like, hey, thanks for getting me to $1 million. Guess I'll go with that $1 million minimum advisor now. That's just not how it works. So, people are going to wish they had listened to us when we were pounding the table for, have a service model that lets you work with people and provide great financial planning profitably. You don't have to do it pro bono. You don't have to do it for free. Charge a fee for financial planning and work with those clients early on. And it's been a tough sell, but obviously more and more people are buying into it and building successful businesses doing it.
Yeah, and one thing I've learned too, what we do does require a little bit of a different skill set. You can't just go from servicing high net worth clients to servicing, young professionals. It's totally different what their needs are. And one of the things that stands out in terms of that is the whole student loan thing. I've gone through several student loan trainings and I still feel like it goes over my head. It's just so complex.
Yeah, it's tough, but you make a great point that I actually think that's one of the big rubs that we see inside of larger firms that are like, oh yeah, we'll start working with young people, and they sit down with the kid of a client and they don't know what to talk about. They don't know what they're doing. It is a totally different skill set and different knowledge base, if you will. It's still financial planning, but the topics that you cover are so different.
Yes, very, very different.
So obviously you have a lot going on, especially with the new merger and building out, starting to lay the foundation for the firm. I mean, what are your sort of targeted 1 and 2 year goals that you'd like to accomplish, either from a growth perspective or bringing on team members or whatnot?
Bringing on Ariel as a partner, and then probably within the next 3 to 5 months, I'm looking to hire another financial planner. She would probably start part-time at first and then grow to full-time. And then at some point, I'd like to actually hire a salesperson. I know that sounds crazy, but I would like to hire a salesperson that will come in and find corporate opportunities for us to do workshops and speaking engagements and like financial education and stuff. So that's a few of the things. Personally, I guess it's an extension of this business, but now I'm kind of separate because this past year, all of it was one business for me. But what I realized recently, once I decided that my end goal is to sell, I decided to separate the business into 2 businesses. So I've separated the financial education and speaking engagements and all that into a separate business. But that's one of my goals, is to build kind of financial literacy platform that for individuals, but then also be able to market that to corporations and educational organizations and things like that, where they're getting financial education from an actual professional, not from a blogger. I mean, nothing against bloggers, but like from a certified financial planner who has had, 10 plus years of experience working with people to actually come in and give real world financial education.
Awesome. Big goals, big vision, and proof is in the pudding that you've been able to accomplish the big goals so far. And I have no doubt that you'll be able to continue doing that. So that's awesome. As we're coming to a close, I'll ask you the famous last question, famous to 5 people. And that is just looking back over your career and the early on in your career, working at the broker dealers, eventually launching your firm. If there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give your younger self, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
Oh, man. I would advise people not to stress over things and just take things one step at a time, because everything kind of ends up working out for the good. And I feel like early on in my career, I was so stressed that I would not make it at Merrill Lynch, and that, what if I get fired? It's going to be the end of the world. And now my mindset is so different. I just feel so free. I feel like, why was I worried about that? I had a Series 7. I could have went and worked anywhere. And then once I got the CFP, I could literally go work anywhere. And I think to myself, why did I stress so much about the little things? Because I think the focus should be less on, am I going to have a job? Am I going to make money? And more on, how can I get better?
That's awesome. That's awesome advice. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share what you've been up to over the last 8-9 months. I'm really excited to see how the new partnership merger and big growth plans go. So it'll be exciting to watch your firm continue down this path for the next several years until that eventual sale one day. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me on, and it's been a pleasure, and thank you.
How much money do you need to launch your own firm? That's a question we've got at XY Planning Network hundreds, if not thousands of times. To answer it once and for all, we developed a free budget template that accounts for the many variables of your first year in business. Along with the template, successful XYPN members opened their books for us and shared how they did it, what they spent, and what they do differently. Our first year budget download is an incredibly valuable resource for anyone considering launching a firm of their own. Download it for free at www.xyplanningnetwork.com/budget. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.